Coming up in this week's programme, the start of leg 3 from Sydney to Auckland.
A lot of pressure on us. We are like Tyco, we have the knife here.
Christmas down under, temperatures soar but there's snow in Sydney.
And the fleet take on the Sydney to Hobart. We look back at one of the most dangerous races.
Basically it was a cyclonic low depression in Bass Strait and we shouldn't have been there.
Competing in the Volvo Ocean Race, Sydney has been the perfect place to recharge their batteries. The Christmas celebrations bring an end to a 3-week stopover that's been full of relaxation and parties. The boats are all ready for the start of leg 3 on Boxing Day, when the crews will compete in the infamous Sydney to Hobart race before continuing the leg to Auckland. The Swedes celebrate Christmas on the 24th, so Team SEB were the first to start the festivities. Temperatures of 35 degrees couldn't stop them from bringing a taste of Scandinavia to sunny Australia. Snow from a local ice rink was brought in, so the children felt more at home.
For us it's strange. That's why we have a bit of snow here that came with the truck. We had a good snowball fight and tried to cool down with the melting snow.
As with all the parties, there's a mixture of crews and families from every team. The competition ends on the dock.
I think it's good that we sort of cross the borders a bit between all the projects. After all, it's just a yacht race. Of course, we're fierce competitors on the water, but it's really nice to see all the families together, communicate with other people from other parts of the world, and all the teams are mixing up. I really like that.
For current race leaders Illbruk, it was a more traditional style Aussie barbecue, steaks, burgers and prawns by the pool, while NewsCorp skipper Jez Fanstone played Santa for his crew.
Merry Christmas everybody from Sydney. As you can see, we're standing here, lovely pit water in the sun. The reindeer is a little bit warm, so I can't stay long.
NewsCorp travelled out of the city to the picturesque setting of Newport for their party. And with 2 podium positions to date, they had reason to celebrate.
Delighted with where we are, for sure. I think second overall, 2 third places. We always wanted to be consistent and steady early on. What people seem to have forgotten is we've only done 2 races. We're nearly halfway around the world. We've only done 2 out of 9 races. And you know, there's a lot of sailing still to be done. And by the time we get to Rio, it could be a whole different complexion on this fleet.
But with the race start tomorrow morning, there could only be so much festive spirit.
Steeped in history, the Sydney to Hobart is one of the world's great ocean races.
On Boxing Day, December the 26th, Sydney Harbour is the focal point for one of Australia's most spectacular sporting events, the start of the 1,000-kilometre Sydney to Hobart yacht race.
For the first time in the history of the Whitbread and now the Volvo Ocean Race, the fleet will be competing in the Sydney to Hobart as part of their 3rd leg to Auckland, New Zealand.
The start is electrifying. It's it's one of the best yacht race starts anywhere in the world. The whole of Australia, it seems, stops on Boxing Day to watch the start of the Sydney to Hobart race.
Dating back to 1954, the race has been marred by ferocious storms and gale-force winds. All agreed it would have been much easier to have sailed north into calmer waters, but the decision to take on some of the world's most dangerous oceans and head south towards Antarctica owed much to the Australian way of life and its spirit of adventure.
What happened in the early days was it was men going to sea in somewhat frail wooden boats to take on one of the worst stretches of water. And from day one, it became a huge event. The public just started to follow this adventure because of the challenge, because of the element of danger. They're sailing on the Tasman Sea, they've got Bass Strait to contend with. It's a rough, tough race. So it's got all the elements that we need for entertainment.
Bass Strait between mainland Australia and Tasmania is where the yachts will encounter the roughest conditions in the race. Strong winds and currents from all directions are funneled into a shallow stretch of water, often producing huge waves. Australian weather expert Roger Badham is helping Amer Sports One skipper Grant Dalton. He's been following the Sydney to Hobart for years and says it's definitely not a race for the faint-hearted.
Tell you what, it's a hard race, and about 1 in every 7 is a really terrible race. But you always, a traditional Hobart always has a southerly change somewhere in the first 24 hours, so you're going to cop it then. So I mean, and you know you're going to get it somewhere or other. You're almost impossible to get from Sydney to Hobart without getting some cloggering of some front somewhere or another.
50 years ago, the race could take as long as 5 or 6 days. And while it may be an uncomfortable ride for the Volvo 60 fleet, they're likely to finish in half that time.
Sydney is always a popular stopover for the ocean racers, a breathtaking and vibrant city with plenty to distract the crews. But there's also a huge amount of work to do on the boats. The last leg through the Southern Ocean was a tough one, leaving some of the teams with a long list of repairs, and there could be worse to come. A daunting upwind trip from Sydney to Hobart.
I've only done 2 Hobarts, but I've seen over 40 knots in both of them, and the chop is horrible. You get really bad waves and a lot of breeze, and it's real boat-breaking stuff. If it's a typical Hobart, I think you could certainly see some damage, and maybe even some structural damage if we go pounding upwind for a few days.
Essentially, the Volvo Ocean Race is a downwind event, and that's what these boats are designed to do. They're not really designed to go upwind. For high-speed downwind work, they have very flat sections forward, which inherently brings on pounding when you're going to windward. So the boats tend to self-destruct.
And it's not only a difficult race for the boats.
A combination of strong wind and big steep waves makes it a very uncomfortable ride on a Volvo Ocean 60. Fortunately, the Sydney Hobart's only 630 miles long.
If you asked people if they wanted to go, they'd say they didn't, but it's part of the rule, so we got to go.
It may be relatively short, but it could be one of the toughest stages of the race, and the finish line in Hobart is certainly not the end of the leg. For the first time, there'll be a pit stop to increase media and public interest.
When the boats cross the finishing line, they'll effectively be suspended from racing, and they get a gun to finish, and then 3 hours later, they will get a gun to restart. During that period, they will go alongside in Hobart. They will do media interviews and talk to the press.
After leaving Hobart, the fleet then face a 1,400-mile journey across the Tasman Sea to the finish line in New Zealand. And while many of the crews have yet to be convinced of the merits of this leg, it will undoubtedly be a close and exciting contest.
I was never a great supporter of it, but you do these races, the rules are set down and you do it. There's no point in sitting there whinging about it for a year. You just got to, it's like a car race. You get told where you go and you go, and you make the best of the situation. It's going to be challenging, that's for sure. And the 3-hour stopover in Hobart, it'll either work for you or it'll work against you, so we'll just see how that pans out.
The leg is expected to take around 8 days, the boats arriving in Auckland in the first week of January.
The dangers of the Sydney to Hobart yacht race were tragically illustrated in the fatal storm of 1998.
It was just awesome, just awesome.
They were conditions that no one had seen before, and basically it was a cyclonic low depression in Bass Strait, and we shouldn't have been there.
6 lives were lost, and of the 115 yachts that started the race, only 43 finished. 5 sunk and 50 sailors were plucked from the seas. It was the greatest single disaster in Australian maritime history. No one had seen the storm coming until it was too late.
And it was only actually after the start of the race that it became obvious with all the computer models, hey, this is going to be quite a serious low pressure system.
It was the worst place at the worst possible time. It happened right off the southeast corner of Australia, and that's where you don't want this to happen, because you've got the current compressing against these storm waves coming out of Bass Strait. And as a result of that, we just had these enormous waves that were a minimum of 80 feet high and possibly closer to 100 feet high. Now, if you want to get an idea of how big that was, go out and look at an 8-level building, and that's what you were looking at. They were almost vertical and breaking, and that's what the yachts were up against, and that was really why the drama happened.
One of the most tragic stories was the sinking of the 56-year-old cutter, the Winston Churchill.
We were actually filming I think it was the second person being rescued from stand aside. And in the middle of that came the Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Winston Churchill, Winston Churchill, Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill, ABC chopper. Go ahead with your position, over.
20 miles southeast of Twofold Bay, over.
Nature of your Mayday, over.
Affirmative, we are getting the life rafts on deck.
That was, at the time, quite unbelievable, and it's still emotional.
Within 5 minutes, the boat had sunk and the 9 crew were left in 2 life rafts. It was 30 hours before they were found, and 3 of them drowned.
Unfortunately, you can't do anything about those 3 guys. You can see them, but you can't do anything, and that's hard. I don't know, I never went to war, but I know what it would have been like, you know, alongside your mate, and he's been shot and you're still alive. I mean, you still survive, don't you? You've got to fight for your own survival.
It's an absolute miracle that 40 people didn't lose their lives in this race. The efforts of the helicopters, the pilots, the crews, the search and rescue people, the way they got there, what they achieved, certainly kept the death toll way, way down.
As a result of the tragedy, there was an investigation into what went wrong, but it was agreed that any decision to continue racing ultimately rested with the skipper of the boat.
This may be the first time the Sydney to Hobart has been included in the Volvo Ocean Race, but it's not a new experience for many of the teams. A year ago, Illbruk, NewsCorp, Amer Sports and Tyco all took part. It was an opportunity for the crews to get some important experience and test themselves against their rivals.
We're keen to get out there with Pinter and the others and see how we go.
We've been building up to this for a long time, and it's great. Fantastic opportunity to race against the other boat.
Djuice Dragons skipper Knut Frostad and his crew also took part on board Nicorette.
We're using it to gain more weather knowledge about Sydney Hobart race, and just to have a break from working on the new boats, really.
NewsCorp were seen off by their sponsor Rupert Murdoch, the media tycoon, a veteran of the Sydney to Hobart.
Pretty damn uncomfortable for 12 hours, 24 hours. You get everything. You get through it, you battle through it, you think you're getting well ahead of your competitors, you go through hell, and then you become 20 hours and when it catches up with you. And that's really annoying.
The boats left Sydney Harbour in a blaze of sunshine. Knut Frostad on Nicorette making a perfect start and pulling away from the rest of the fleet. More than 3,000 spectator boats turned out to see the fleet fight their way out of the harbour at the start of the 630-mile classic. The 4 Volvo boats were soon involved in a tight contest, never being separated by more than 20 miles. With 150 miles to go, Tyco held the lead. NewsCorp and Illbruk were still in sight. Amer Sports, under their old skipper Roy Heiner, trailed in 4th. With 40-knot winds, it was a typical Sydney to Hobart, and the conditions took their toll on the rest of the fleet. More than 20 were forced to retire, with boat damage and injured crew. Approaching the finish line, Tyco and Illbruk were neck and neck. But on the River Derwent just after dawn, Illbruk snatched the lead. They held on for victory over their Volvo rivals and 3rd place overall in the race. It was to be a taste of things to come for John Kostecki's team.
It was quite close. We saw NewsCorp and Tyco most of the race, and especially the last 48 hours. And so as usual, these boats are, real close, and so it was, real tight racing.
Tyco were a close second, with NewsCorp a familiar third, while Amer Sports arrived in Hobart a disappointing fourth.
After 2 legs and 2 wins, Illbruk are undoubtedly the team to beat. Maximum points have given John Kostek's team a 4-point advantage over their closest rivals, NewsCorp. Amer Sports won a third, with SEB now 4th after finishing 2nd in the last leg. Djuice Dragons and Amer Sports both have 7 points, but because Djuice finished higher in the last leg, they take 5th place, while Tyco's failure to finish the last leg has seen them drop to 7th. The women on board Amer Sports 2 remain on course for the wooden spoon. Yachting pundits Rob Mundell and Stuart Alexander have been following this race closely. Both believe there's still everything to play for and that Illbruk can be caught.
Yeah, I tend to think that they can be and probably will be beaten. One of the great things about the race this year is the point score system, which is going to leave the race wide open. And Illbruk, while they've won 2 legs, they've shown the benefit of time in being the best prepared boat for the race, but I think the others are closing the gap. We saw that in the Southern Ocean League. We saw the fleet so close for so much of the time, and everyone else in here that in Sydney who are not the Illbruk team, I believe are confident that they can beat them, and I think we're going to see a really good race from here on.
I'll go with that because we knew that although this was a small fleet, it was a really good quality fleet, Rob, and that anybody could win a leg, and that's still true. And the second thing is that I think that at every race, everyone has said the same thing. We have taken another leap forward in terms of professionalism, in terms of pressure. And I'm sure that in every race they've been right, and it's no less right this time.
The tactical pressures on the crews now, the physical demands, that before it'd be, oh, well, we'll just wait a little while and see if we're going to jibe or we'll change the sail. Now, if there's a change in wind conditions, a change in wind direction, you do it. You jibe, you tack, you change course, you do whatever you would do in a harbour race or a short race off the coast to gain. There's no more resting, there's no more waiting. And these guys have arrived in Sydney very, very tired. But now, what is going to be very interesting, and we've got to remember there are still 7 legs to go, and the old catchphrase, anything can happen. The Hobart race is going to be an amazing test, and I know the guys, when they were coming up the coast, looking at the conditions coming out of the south, saying, we're not looking forward to going back into that if we get those conditions going to Hobart. There's every chance they will. I think the Hobart race really could be a turning point in this race.
Well, I think that to some extent, Rob, the crews feel that they're being turned into media monkeys for the sake of
But still, without a sponsor, you haven't got a race.
I understand. I think that they would like, if they have to do the Sydney-Hobart, they would like to have done a handbrake turn through the finish line and keep going. Not least because the rhythm of the boat is going to get broken by stopping. But as you say, the public is interested, and the public can only see these people and talk to them if they're available, and that means just popping them in and then popping them out again. But there's ups and downs to it.
So, Stuart, 2 legs down. It's really still wide open. Who's going to be on the podium at the end? Who's going to win it?
I said originally Amer won, Tyco and Illbruk. Of those 3, 2 are not looking to flash at the moment. So I will stick my neck out. And I will say that Amer 1 can begin to get it together, although I think they've got to make crew changes to do it. And I will still say that Tyco can really put in some blistering performances. So I'm going to stick, even though I shouldn't, with my original 3.
Certainly Illbruk, you can't deny that. I will stick my neck out and say NewsCorp will be on the podium at the end of it, the way they're going now. 2nd on points at this stage. Who's going to be the 3rd boat there? Not easy. It won't be Djuice. Probably SEB.
We'll have a pint on it in Kiel.
Maybe a keg.
Race day and the teams prepare to leave Darling Harbour. As always, it's an emotional time for crews as they say their goodbyes to friends and family, although on this leg they'll only be at sea for around 11 days. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
It will be very intense, very hard on the crews, both physically and mentally. There'll be a lot of sleep deprivation.
This is a leg that all of the teams are desperate to win, and after a poor start, no one needs the points more than Amer Sports 2, Tyco and Amer Sports.
A lot of pressure on us. We are like Tyco, we have the knife here, and
So you have to be cool about it, but of course we have a lot of pressure on us, yes.
We need to get back into this race in a big way after the disappointment of the last leg, so we need to have a good result. And also it's going home, which is you know, a lot of people, a lot of friends and a lot of supporters watching, so you know, we're going to try and do well, obviously.
Oh, it's every Kiwi's dream, I think, to come into New Zealand first, yeah. So we'll be pushing just as hard as any other boat, but maybe especially the Kiwis.
As the boats left the dockside, they paid tribute to the most famous Kiwi sailor of them all. A wreath was laid for Sir Peter Blake, who was tragically killed 2 weeks ago.
Still very sad, and it's hard to sort of realise that he has gone, but I'm sure he'll be up there looking down on us all, wishing us all well.
Having paid their respects, the Volvo fleet head out into Sydney Harbour for the start of leg 3 of their round-the-world voyage.
The countdown has begun to the start of the 57th Sydney to Hobart. The city skyline making a dramatic backdrop to the fleet as they head for the start line. A tense time for all the crews, the winds very light and fickle, gusting just over 7 knots. And the smoke from the raging bushfires outside Sydney is doing little to help visibility. All are looking for that perfect start, and with more than 70 other boats on the racecourse, there's no room for error.
Keep the boat speed up, guys.
There it is, the gun's gone, and leg 3 of the Volvo Ocean Race around the world is underway on a very smoky Sydney Harbour. At the top of the screen, Team NewsCorp got a very nice start, as has Tyco in the middle of the pack. But back aft, this yacht, Amer Sports, again stuck in a windlass hole and travelling, well, you can't go much slower than that. Damien Duke, shredder, up the mast of Team NewsCorp, has spotted the breeze, and Team NewsCorp has called it right. They've got it perfectly on the eastern shore of Sydney Harbour. The breeze is filling in the sea breeze, and they are away. In the middle with the green sails, SEB struggling to pick up the breeze. Here we are on board SEB now. Considering sail changes on SEB, as we watch now Amer Sports 2, the all-girl crew led by Lisa McDonald. Oh, they've got a problem here. There's a halyard caught in their Code 0 headsail, their masthead headsail there. Yeah, they're setting the jib inside it so that they can try to solve that problem. They'll tack here by the look of it. You can see the girls hauling on the furler. They're trying to fix that problem. They're going to have to lower that sail. Now we're at Sydney Heads, and here is Illbruk hanging on to second spot behind Team NewsCorp. Djuice Dragons, Nut for a Stad, coming there very close astern of this yacht. Illbruk, sailed by John Kostecki, the German entry. Trying to cover Djuice Dragons, that's got very good pace on. As we look now at the spectator fleet escorting the combined fleets, the Volvo race and the Sydney Hobart race, out of Sydney Harbour. Here now is Team NewsCorp. They're leading at the first mark. Djuice Dragons, in fact, has got the jump on Illbruk. Coming around attack now. They will be second out of the harbour. Oh, they've got a problem here. The headsail isn't coming on. Yeah, look at that. They've had to cut the sheet on their Code 0 headsail. It must have got jammed. Now, John Kostecki coming around the mark and heading out to sea as they watch Djuice ahead of them. Look at the gain there for Djuice Dragons, and NewsCorp in the distance. So Illbruk is third out of the harbour, and quite close to them is SEB, Gura Krantz, furling their Code 0 now to tack and leave the harbour in fourth spot. Tyco made such a wonderful start in the middle of the harbour now, coming out in fifth spot. They really lost it when the breeze filled in from the eastern shore. And here's a real surprise. The all-girl crew, Lisa McDonald's team, are leading stablemate Amer Sports 1, sailed by Grant Dalton, out of Sydney Harbour. So Amer Sports 2 leading Amer Sports 1, exiting Sydney Harbour. That leaves just one more of the 8 Volvo boats to come, and that is Amer Sports. Here they are now. We saw them in that windlass hole at the start of the race. Now following the 7 rivals out of the harbour. Ahead of them, 630 miles to Hobart, and then a sprint across the Tasman Sea to Auckland, a total of 2,050 nautical miles to make up leg 3 of the Volvo Ocean Race.
Coming up next time, the best of the action as the fleet leaves Sydney en route to Hobart.
Struck by a tornado just 8 hours into leg 3.
Huge water spouts coming this way. One boat's just got engulfed in it.
SEB out of the leg after their rudder shears off.
And just this to happen to you, a mechanical thing like this to happen to you is gutting, you know.
And the fight to the finish line goes right down to the wire.
We have about 15 miles to go, so keep your fingers crossed.
4 seconds, 3, 2, 1, gun. And the 57th Sydney to Hobart Yacht Race is underway at a very slow pace in a very, very light breeze. It looks like Team NewsCorp has got a big break here on its rivals. They've gone for the sea breeze.
It was NewsCorp who set the pace for leg 3, but for the back markers, it was painfully slow.
Yeah, things haven't gone quite according to plan at the moment. We've got to bid on to make good back our losses here. We're expecting some up and down breeze, and we're just going to have to see how we go. I've got to catch up with my wife, who's just in front of me. But Team Amer Sports trying to claw back what we lost in the first few minutes of the race.
It's going to be a great battle to be first out of Sydney Harbour and to pick up this $10,000.
It was NewsCorp who were first round the top mark, leaving the others to fight it out behind them. It may have been a light start, but the typically strong southerly breeze kicked in outside Sydney Heads, and the Volvo fleet got a pounding. By just 7 miles, and most of them were in sight of each other. Tyco had come back from 5th to fight it out with Illbruk for first place. NewsCorp being pushed back into 3rd, with Amer Sports and Djuice Dragons just on their stern. But worse was to come. 6 hours into the leg, the fleet was hit by a massive tornado.
Get ready to come on deck. Not that we were sleeping really. So, huge water spouts coming this way. One boat's just got engulfed in it. And I think we're going to have to get all our sails down and sit and wait and hope that it doesn't get us. Hang on, I'll see if I can get another shot.
It just sort of charged towards us, and it was just spreading, getting bigger and bigger, and and we were, well, I was wondering what are we going to do.
Does anybody want life jackets? Life jackets?
They were absolutely at the mercy of this incredibly erratic waterspout that was all over the place. They couldn't get away from it. There was nothing they could do but just wait.
Many of the boats sustained serious damage, Djuice taking on water when the hatch came loose.
Slowly it filled up with water, and suddenly we realized the boat was about to nosedive. And then it was all full of water in the front, so we had to slow down, and we lost a lot of miles.
And Amer Sports 2 broke their forestay. Lisa McDonald was injured during the struggle, Kieran Henderson having to come off deck to treat her after something got caught in her eye. The Hobart race was living up to its reputation, and as the fleet continued towards the Bass Strait, they knew the worst wasn't over yet.
So let's take a closer look at the race so far. It was NewsCorp who led out through the heads, but there was soon a battle at the front. Tyco surged through the fleet to take pole position 4 hours after the start, but the chasing pack were just a mile back. On every sked, the lead changed, but Illbruk once again were looking dominant, taking the lead 5 hours into the race and holding on to it as they made their way down the Australian coast. But this is a make-or-break leg for Tyco, and they weren't letting go.
So a day into the racing and the leaderboard looks like this. Illbruk in pole position with Tyco in second, just a mile back. NewsCorp a third, 2 miles off the lead, with Amer just a mile behind them. SEB are now in fifth, trailing by 9 miles, along with Djuice Dragons. And Amer 1 are now 21 miles back, with Amer 2 bringing up the rear.
40 hours into the leg and disaster strikes the Swedish yacht SEB. The rudder has broken away from the hull, leaving a large hole, and hundreds of litres of water are pouring into the boat. The hole is plugged using a bucket and T-shirts, and the water is bailed out.
Still leaking, probably 20 litres now, but it was up to here.
Yeah, it was a bit of a drama here for a while. Just coming in, tons of water filling up. We had all the watertight doors blocked and rigged up the emergency pumps, bucketing and water out through the hatch here, putting a bucket in the hole for the rudder.
They'd almost lost the rudder because the mechanism holding it in place had failed. They managed to save it before it fell off completely, but the crew now had to steer the boat using the emergency rudder and a makeshift tiller. The danger was over, but SEB were out of the leg.
Unfortunately, we got a bit of a rudder problem here, which means we cannot continue. And now we're on our way back to the Australian mainland, and the first port of call there is Eden.
We're heading north. Everybody else is heading south. So it's very painful. Not fun at all, and only one thing, thank God everybody's safe.
Gunnar Krantz contacted his shore manager who was waiting for the boat in Hobart.
We'll go down and we'll fly back to Sydney. We'll drive down to Eden tonight, and we'll check it out and see what we'll make a decision on tomorrow, what exactly we can do with the boat, and get ourselves geared up for League 4. Still got a race to win.
Eden is 500 kilometres south of Sydney and is often used by boats damaged during the Sydney to Hobart, and a familiar port of call for one SEB crew member, although never by choice.
I think Eden's my home port now. 3 finishes, 9 starts.
That's Hobart for you, Tom?
It's Hobart for me, mate. 3 from 9. Off Jinx.
Yeah, good morning. This is SEB. We're just coming in to your harbour. Where do you want us to dive out?
The leg may be over for SEB, but they're not out of the race. The plan is to repair the boat as quickly as possible and then sail on to Auckland for the start of leg 4. It's going to take a day before the boat's ready. Plenty of time for the crew to reflect on what happened.
We heard quite a large bang, and Tony Mutter was steering, and he said, "I've got nothing," and said the rudder's gone. And so we opened up the back hatch and she was gone. She'd fallen out.
We think it's a mechanical failure. There are several bolts that hold the bottom bearing into the hull, and it looks like they stripped their thread and the rudder started to go. We managed to get a rope onto it as it was falling out of the boat. The whole thing happened probably in under a minute.
Without doubt, the cause was because of the rough weather that we had. And had it happened in that sort of weather, yeah, we could have potentially had a disaster on our hands. And just this to happen to you, a mechanical thing like this to happen to you, is gutting, you know.
SEB were 4th overall, and while this puts a huge dent in their chances of winning, they're not giving up.
Of course, we're here to stay. Not in this port, I hope. We're here to stay in the race, and we're definitely determined to get back in there with full force.
Back Back on the racetrack, and after battling their way across the Bass Strait, the fleet finally have some respite from the continuous pounding.
And it's been a extreme change in conditions, as you can see behind us here. We've spent the first couple of days in very fresh conditions, especially yesterday, sailing upwind in 35 knots, double reef main, number 4. We've had water spouts, which have gave us all a bit of a scare coming out of Sydney Heads. And the Bass Strait was its usual rough and tough old self. There's 4 Volvo 60s all in a row straight across here. There's probably no more than half a mile between the front 4 leading boats. The girls have had a bit of trouble last night and broken a forestay. SEB's had a bit of trouble. And Dolts is about 20 miles back. Djuice is about 7 miles back. So tight old tussle, still plenty to play for.
With every sked, the positions have changed, and Amer Sports are now leading the fleet along with NewsCorp, who've made up ground after taking a battering during the storms. But this is a game of cat and mouse, and within 3 hours it was all change at the front. The inshore breeze died for Amer Sports, and they had to surrender their lead once again to Illbruk. Tyco and NewsCorp were fighting it out for second, with Amer dropping back to 4th. Djuice Dragons, though, is not far back, and no one can be ruled out at this stage.
Right now, we've got to remember we're setting the stage for possibly the greatest finish ever in a Hobart race. We may see 4 boats coming into the Derwent River side by side, so it's going to be a grandstand finish the way it's looking.
Coming up after the break, emergency at sea as the crews have to abandon ship.
It's been a wake-up call. That's probably a pretty good word for it.
And the fight to the finish line. Who will be first into Hobart? A desperate attempt to find a missing crew member. The boat's capsized and the freezing waters are draining the life from those outside the life raft.
Come on, we're 3 and 9! Stop the car! Save them, John!
Luckily, this is just a training exercise for the new team members, but it's all too often been a harsh reality on the Sydney to Hobart race. Now all new crew members have to undergo a rigorous training course to make them aware of the dangers. The odds are stacked against survival in these waters.
Who's heard of secondary drowning? They say that if you drown at sea, right, and they do manage to bring you back to life, they revive you and everything, you'll drown an hour later anyway. What happens is your body says, wait, there's a lot of salt in the lungs here. Let's put a bit of fluid into those lungs. Let's hydrate the lungs, and you actually drown in your own fluid. Secondary drowning. So that's what that hood is all about, to avoid secondary drowning.
To try and minimise the risks, they try out all the new gear and learn its limitations. Putting on a life jacket when you're already in the water is almost impossible. So how difficult was that to get on in the water?
I haven't got it on. I wouldn't be able to do it.
It's quite surprising.
It is very surprising, yeah. I couldn't do it on land, but after this is inflated, it's just... Where do you start? I've got no idea.
On this course, they learn everything from how to minimise heat loss in the water to how to right the life raft, things many of them had never even considered.
It's been a wake-up call. That's probably a pretty good word for it.
Pretty difficult. I never expected it to be so hard.
I think it's something that everybody should do because it does get quite tough out there, especially when they turn the lights off and they're chucking buckets of water in your face. It's really not that pleasant.
And this is just in a swimming pool.
It wasn't too difficult, but if you can consider the situation, circumstances you'll be under when it's real, it's pretty scary. It's more of a makes you think more than how difficult it is, you know.
If you magnified this by about 1,000 times, you'd probably get something close to a real situation. But at least we can give people in a controlled environment an idea of, you know, the devastating consequences of having to abandon a vessel.
Oh, you just got to do it, don't you? I mean, it's life and death, really.
It's given me a damn good respect of how hard it would be.
Back on the racecourse, day 3 and the front 6 boats are now separated by just 4 miles as they make their way down the coast of Tasmania. Illbruk carry out some running repairs and send Ray Davis over the side to get some weed off the rudder. This has been one of the most closely fought battles in the history of the race.
It's NewsCorp, probably only about 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. Now, the close racing's continued. We've got at least 4 boats inside at the moment. Give us a quick scenario of what you think is going to happen between here and Hobart and our likely position relative to that.
Well, I just wished I had a crystal ball that would tell me. At the moment, the wind's dying off, typical sort of Tasmanian situation, light westerly. We're 30 or 40 miles from the land. There's always a possibility we'll get a sea breeze, which would make the day a little unpleasant.
The winds are still very light, making the race even more tactical. With such small margins, any error could be the difference between 1st and 6th place. Amer Sports 1 has gained on the fleet, moving up to 4th, but Amer Sports 2, still under jury rig after their forestay broke, are now 80 miles back.
The girls have very cleverly set up a jury rig on their boat and got it safe. They're making pretty good progress towards Hobart. They're doing 9 to 10 knots. They've got their code 0 set, which is the safest way to go, their masthead headsail. But it looks like they will be okay and they will reach Hobart.
So on day 3, this is how it looks. Tyco are now leading the fleet along with NewsCorp. Djuice have moved up to 3rd, with Amer Sports 1 making a dramatic comeback to take 4th. Illbruk have slipped back to 5th, with Amer dropping down to 6th, although there's only 4 miles between the front 6 boats. Amer Sports 2 are 81 miles back in 7th, with SEB now out of the leg in 8th place.
Australian weather expert Roger Badham knows the waters around Tasmania better than most. Clouds, as he's known, works with the Amer Sports teams during the stopover, and on this leg, navigators Roger Nielsen and Genevieve White will need all the help they can get.
This leg, where you're basically sailing in coastal waters, so you're suffering the effects of land the whole way, and that's different to a lot of the ocean legs where you're out in the sea.
The main hurdle on this leg is the finish up the Derwent River. The 12-mile stretch has caught out many teams, and it's here the race is often won and lost.
Well, going into Hobart is strange and testing for the crews. It's wonderful for the sponsors and the media. And actually, this is a world first. And if it works, we may see this happening in other races because everyone's going to get a slice at the yachts when they get there. But the big test for the crews are that they could be doing so well, and I've experienced it myself in the Hobart race, doing so well right up to the entrance to the Derwent River. You park there, all the rest of the fleet come over the horizon and go past you because they see you parked. You've still got 12 miles to go up the river to Hobart. So getting into Hobart at the right time and the right conditions is going to be critical.
Well, the Derwent's just a whole tricky place. I mean, it's a place where the wind shuts down at night. It's where the tide goes in and out, and you've got to choose the correct side of the river where it's very narrow. Just getting up there can be. I mean, it's won and lost every Hobart race.
At the moment, the fleet is so closely packed, it's anyone's guess who'll lead on the final stretch. But this is a crucial stage. If they cross the line first, it'll give them the breathing space they need before the 1,500-mile sprint to Auckland.
Day 4 and the closing stages of the leg are living up to expectations. As the fleet head towards the River Derwent, the wind has completely died and the crews can only sit and wait.
It's quite interesting so far. It's a long way to go still. About 20 miles, 1 knot, 20 hours.
It was a torturous finish to what has been a gruelling race. With the Derwent River in sight, the fleet were parked and many saw their advantage slipping away. A wind hole inshore has caught out many of the teams, including Illbruk, but Amer Sports 1 at Tyco saw a way round it.
You go up and you go all the way around this light patch to where it's all filled in. It's this bit where Nicorette is, very light.
It was Amer who got the new breeze first and made a break from the pack. Once they'd gained the advantage, they didn't look back.
For a change, we had a little bit of
I don't know if we call it luck, but at least the gods has been with us, and we could make a detour around the Cape here after Tasman Island, and all the others went into less wind, and we arced around them, and now we are in the lead, which feels fantastic. We are 4 miles in front of the next boat, so keep your fingers crossed.
And it looks like we've got a clear run to the finish, but anything could happen yet. We're kind of still holding our breath.
The wind gods were smiling on Amer Abloy, and they held on to their lead.
Maybe the fact that we're carrying 12 pairs of red socks on board as a tribute to Peter Blake's helped us out a little bit here on the luck side.
Hundreds of spectator boats joined them as they made their way towards the finish line.
Now we get dangerous, huh?
It's fantastic. The boys did a fantastic job in this race, and they're kind of rearing to go in the next one. As my mum would say, it's better to be lucky than good. I have to say there was a bit of luck involved in it, but coming in Storm Bay around Tassie Island, we were all bunched together. It was light airs, really on for young and old. It was actually quite good fun.
No one will have enjoyed it more than Mark Rudiger, who's finally got a result after 2 very disappointing finishes.
When we all parked up outside here, we decided that staying off the coast would be the best place to be, and we positioned ourselves there, and we're patient and got lucky, and the wind filled in, and so it was good positioning and a little bit of luck.
This result won't count towards the overall standings. It's the first into Auckland who'll pick up the points, but it's still a great confidence boost for the team. 25 minutes behind Amer was Grant Dalton's Amer 1. After a poor start, they've managed to sneak past in the closing stages, but no points, and they feel no real gain.
This will all be different tomorrow. The skids will be different. It could be different in 4 hours from now. So I don't think the result in here means anything. It doesn't mean anything other than better to do well than not do well. You know?
It's not the result. We continue. That's the problem. If it had been a result, I would have been pleased. But there is no result.
Tyco, who were leading for much of the race, arrived in 3rd. At last, a podium finish for the team.
We were a little bit rusty when we went out of Sydney, I'd have to say, and you know we all seemed a bit half asleep. But by the time we got halfway into the leg, everyone was into the rhythm of things. But yeah, it was definitely a wake-up call.
Djuice got their best result to date, finishing 4th ahead of NewsCorp.
Our goal here was to be together with the front 3-4 boats, and I think we managed that well. And now it's a faster leg over to Auckland, hopefully. Not so much upwind.
There was disappointment for NewsCorp, who arrived in 5th place. And despite collecting a cheque for $10,000 for being first out of Sydney, there were few smiles from the team.
It's always disappointing not to finish your race where you started it, but we've got 1,400 miles now to get it back, and we're pretty confident we will, so it's not over yet.
The teams have 3.5 hours here to make small repairs, and after passing through a typhoon, there was some serious sail damage to attend to.
Yeah, that was a bit interesting. I think we saw about 60, but only just for a flash. We took a jib out. Just the tape, we can fix that. We'll probably start fixing it now.
We are trying to get some of our communication equipment going because it's all been flooded. And then we are replacing a main halyard, which we're just in the rig doing now. And apart from that, the boat's in pretty good shape. Just tensioning some buttons and fixing a nav light that broke in the front. But it's pretty good shape.
The big surprise was Illbruk, who arrived in 6th place, despite having led for most of the race. Last of the leading pack, this was a definite change of fortune for John Kostecki's team.
It's really tough to cover, and everybody's really good, and the wind filled in from inshore, from offshore, and you know, on the last one that counted, we missed.
The women aboard Amer Sports 2 finally arrived more than 6 hours later after having to make an emergency pit stop to repair their forestay. But when they hit the dock, there was more trouble, this time with their rudder.
Until we lift the boat out, we don't know for certain, but the rudder has been damaged both on the leading edge as well as there's a significant crack on the aft edge going forward.
Coming up next time, is this the girls out of the leg, or will they continue to Auckland?
Plus, conflict on the dock as NewsCorp protests Tyco.
They have basically violated not only the sailing instructions of our race, but also the Sydney-Hobart race.
We're having a hearing at 12 o'clock. We're adamant we're in the right.